In February 1957, on a quiet wooded road in Philadelphia, a college student stumbled upon something that would haunt the city for decades. Tucked away in the underbrush was a large cardboard box, the kind that once held a bassinet from J.C. Penney. Inside, wrapped in a simple plaid blanket, was the body of a small boy. He had no name. No one had reported him missing. He was simply there, a silent testament to a tragedy that no one could explain. This is the story of the child who came to be known as the Boy in the Box, a mystery that would stretch over 65 years, pulling in investigators, psychics, and generations of amateur detectives, all desperate to answer one question: who was this child and why was he abandoned? When police arrived at the scene on Susquehanna Road, the sight was heartbreaking. The boy was estimated to be between 4 and 6 years old. He was clean, his hair recently cut in a rough, homemade style, and his fingernails were neatly trimmed. He was malnourished, but there were no signs of long-term neglect. In fact, he looked as though he had been cared for, at least at some point. He had several small scars on his body, including one on his ankle and groin from a possible surgery, but the cause of death was determined to be blunt force trauma. He had been struck repeatedly in the head. Someone had cared for this little boy, bathed him, fed him, and then someone had killed him. The scene was a paradox. Why would someone go to the trouble of cleaning him after his death, only to dump his body in a desolate, wooded area? The cardboard box itself offered few clues. It was a common item sold at J.C. Penney stores across the country. The blanket he was wrapped in was also ordinary. The only other items found nearby were a man's blue corduroy cap and a child's scarf, but it was impossible to say if they were connected to the case. The police were left with a ghostly child who had seemingly appeared out of nowhere. The investigation began immediately and with great urgency. The Philadelphia police force was determined to identify the boy and bring his killer to justice. They took his fingerprints and footprints. They photographed him, dressed and undressed, hoping anyone would recognize him. They created a post-mortem poster with his likeness, printing over 400,000 copies. These posters were plastered in every post office in Philadelphia and police stations across the country. The headline read, "Have you seen this child?" The American Medical Association circulated the flyer in its journal, hoping a doctor might recognize the surgical scars. The story was picked up by newspapers nationwide. The public was horrified and captivated. How could a child just vanish without a trace? No family, no friends, no school teachers came forward. It was as if he had never existed. The initial leads led nowhere. Investigators checked the sales records for the bassinet box from J.C. Penney, but it was an impossible task. They followed up on tips from across the country, but each one was a dead end. They looked into orphanages, foster homes, and institutions, but found no record of a missing boy matching his description. The case grew colder with each passing day. The boy was eventually buried in a potter's field, a public burial ground for the unknown and unclaimed. His headstone, paid for by the investigators who couldn't forget him, read, "Heavenly Father, bless this unknown boy." It seemed his story, and his name would be buried with him. But the investigators never gave up. Remington Bristow, an employee at the medical examiner's office, was particularly obsessed with the case. He worked on it tirelessly, even after his retirement, spending his own money to keep the investigation alive. He pursued theories for decades, convinced the answer was just around the corner. Over the years, two major theories emerged that seemed plausible, yet both ultimately led to more questions. The first centered on a foster home located about 1.5 miles from where the body was found. In 1960, a psychic contacted police, claiming to have a vision. She led them to the foster home, where she said the boy had been hidden. Inside, investigators found a bassinet sold by J.C. Penney, similar to the one from the box, and blankets like the one the boy was wrapped in. The foster father seemed to fit a potential profile. The theory was that the boy was the child of his stepdaughter, an unwed mother, and that his death was an accident that the family covered up to avoid scandal. It was a compelling story, but despite intense questioning, no concrete evidence ever linked the family to the boy. Without a confession or a definitive link, it remained just a theory. The second major theory came to light decades later in 2002. A woman, identified only as M, came forward with a shocking story. She claimed her abusive mother had purchased the boy from his birth parents in 1954. She said his name was Jonathan. According to her, mother was incredibly abusive to the boy, and one evening, after he vomited up his dinner of baked beans, she flew into a rage and beat him to death against a wall. Her mother then cut his long hair, which she had always been proud of, and the two of them drove to the woods in Fox Chase to dump his body. Story was incredibly detailed and seemed to match many of the facts of the case, including the boy's malnourishment and the cause of death. Investigators were intrigued. Had a history of mental illness, but her account was eerily specific. Police took her seriously, but once again, they struggled to find corroborating evidence. Her neighbors at the time couldn't remember seeing a young boy living with the family, and without a body to exhume and test for DNA, it was her word against a wall of silence. For years, the boy remained America's unknown child, a symbol of the forgotten and the voiceless. His case file grew thicker, filled with dead ends and broken leads, but technology was advancing, and with it a new hope emerged. For decades, his gravestone was a lonely marker in a Philadelphia cemetery, but the story was far from over. Advances in DNA technology and genetic genealogy, the same science used to catch the Golden State Killer, offered a final, desperate chance to give the boy his name back. In 2019, his body was exhumed for a third time. Forensic scientists were able to extract enough DNA from his remains to build a genetic profile. Using that profile, genealogists began the painstaking work of building a family tree, searching for distant cousins through public DNA databases. It was like looking for a single needle in a haystack the size of the entire country, but they found one, a match, and then another. Slowly, painstakingly, they traced the lines back through generations. And in late 2022, more than 65 years after he was found, the Philadelphia Police Department made an announcement that sent shockwaves around the world. The boy in the box finally had a name. He was Joseph Augustus Sorelli, born January 13, 1953. The genealogists had tracked down his birth certificate and identified his parents. The mystery of his identity was solved, but the mystery of his life and his death remains. We now know who he was, but we still don't know why his life ended so tragically in that cardboard box. The investigation is still active, now armed with a name and a family tree. The silence that surrounded this little boy for so long has finally been broken. His story isn't just about a cold case. It's a powerful reminder that no one should be forgotten. Thanks for watching. If you found this story as compelling as we did, please like this video and subscribe for more deep dives into history's most fascinating mysteries.